Hi viewers, my name is Mr. S. Twala. I'm the founder of the Shabbat Foundation Resource Center. Welcome to Shabbat Foundation Corner. Today I'm humbled. I am with Dr. Muso. Dr. Muso is the president of Association of Yes to Teachers and Lecturers in Zimbabwe. Welcome, going to Ziyatunga, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Ziyatunga Kompulawayo, Baba. Thank you so much for hosting me today.
Okay, Dr. Muso, as Shabbat Foundation, our mission is very simple. We want to reach every student in Zimbabwe in recognition that the world is transforming digital. So every student, most of the students in Zimbabwe, they've got a cell phone, and that cell phone can be a digital classroom. So as Shabbat Foundation, we flight our lessons on my YouTube channel, Mr. S. Twala, Facebook account, and TikTok account. We also have got WhatsApp lessons. So Mr. Muso, or Dr. Muso, sorry, where can students find you?
They can also find me on my Facebook page, Arthur Marara and Mr. Muso. They can as well find me on my YouTube channel, Menas Msongelwa.
Okay, wow, that's absolutely good. Okay, Dr. Muso, for 2024, what do you have for students? What can we do for the students in 2024?
We have prepared powerful seminars around the country. We are going to be visiting 5 provinces. Remember, in Zimbabwe, we've got 10 provinces. We are going to visit 5 of these provinces. We'll be here going to Ziyatunga. Then after that, we move to Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe. After that, we move to Mutare. Then we move to Chinoi, and eventually in Aguero, the city of progress.
And Mutare.
And Mutare, yes. Those Wasus, we are coming for a seminar in Mutare.
All right, Dr. Muso, without further ado, in this lesson, we want to talk about the Vienna Settlement.
Yes.
The Vienna Settlement is one of the interesting and one of the easiest topics in European history. And it's section C.
Yes.
All right, the Vienna Settlement of 1814 to 1815. Maybe let me just give them a background information about the Vienna Settlement.
Yes.
The Vienna Settlement came to being after the Napoleonic Wars. We know that Napoleon created some disorder. Not only Napoleon, there was 20 years of disorder and turmoil in Europe because of the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era.
Yes.
So after the defeat of Napoleon in 1814, the great powers, they came together. They came together in Austria. The capital city of Austria was known as Vienna, where they held a conference. So the Vienna Settlement is more of a conference which was held in Austria so that they can come out with the way forward after the defeat of Napoleon. So basically, what's the Vienna Settlement? The Vienna Settlement is the first post-Napoleonic settlement that was designed to map the way forward as far as the Napoleonic possessions were concerned. So the great powers at Vienna, they wanted to come up with ways, or they wanted to come up with the guidelines that the European countries, they were going to follow after the defeat of Napoleon. Like I said, that Napoleon had created a lot of disorder and turmoil and chaos in Europe. So after the defeat, they came together. They said, guys, let's sit down. And they sat at Vienna. I said Vienna was the capital city of Austria. So they came up with the principles, and these principles are known as guidelines that were supposed to be followed by each and every European country. So these guys, they had aims. One of their aims that I'm going to discuss, they wanted to come up with everlasting peace in Europe. One of the things that was affecting Europe as a result of the French Revolution and Napoleon, there was no peace. Why? Because Europe was affected by war after war. Talk of the Napoleonic Wars. And number 2, they wanted to restore the legitimate rulers. And another thing, that's why these guys, they were called peacemakers, because their primary aim, they wanted to maintain peace in Europe. And another thing that they wanted to balance power. They were now afraid of a situation whereby a single nation can dominate the affairs of Europe. It was so with France. That's why France created a lot of chaos and turmoil in Europe. And another thing, what they really wanted to do, they wanted to come up with a stable government, whereby every country was equal as a result of the balance of power. So these are some of the aims of the statesmen at Vienna. But before we start today's lesson, one of the things, since this is an introduction, the statesmen or the great powers at Vienna, they received a lot of condemnation and criticism because the European nationals, they felt that these guys, they ignored 2 important forces. These were forces of nationalism and liberalism. So in this lesson, Dr. Muso, this was the introduction to the Vienna Settlement. So what's your take on the Vienna Settlement, Doctor?
I can say that the Vienna Settlement, according to me, also, it was a success to a greater extent. Although what I'm saying is opposed by so many scholars, but I think these scholars did not go deeper, they did not put their shoes deeper on what transpired in 1815. These are the scholars who wrote their books in the 90s and also in the 2000s, whereby they took information without thoroughly analyzing what was the situation really taking place in Europe in 1815. Possibly, Mr. Twala, let me start by the people who attended the Vienna Settlement in 1815. Let me start with the Tsar of Russia. In 1815, he was 38 years old. He was a little bit older. 38, you'll be a little bit older. Then the other two statesmen, they were around 40s. Then Hardenberg from Prussia, he was 65 years old. So the setup of the people who gathered in 1815, it consisted of people who were mature. If people who are mature gather, they are worried about peace. They are worried about tomorrow. They are worried about future. So the coming up of these four people who were above the age of 35 on its own, we see that it marked the beginning of the success of the Vienna Settlement, although some scholars would want to debate and think otherwise.
Okay, Dr. Muso, well, that's good, Dr. Muso. Like you have actually gave us we have enlightened us on the people who attended the Vienna Settlement. But let's talk about the constitutional differences of these members of the Vienna Settlement. For example, let's talk about Britain through customary. We know that Britain was liberal. It was a liberal country. Why? Because they attained liberalism through the revolution.
Certainly.
But let's talk about these other powers, these other European powers. We talk of Austria, we talk of Russia, we talk of Prussia. These guys were conservative in nature.
Yes.
Why? These guys, they were conservative. Actually, they wanted to bargain through revolutions.
Certainly.
But we see, what do you think about that? This is the beginning of the Vienna Settlement. We see Britain is a standalone, Britain is liberal, while these other powers, they are conservative. What can you say about that?
On the Vienna Settlement, we can say that the stance of Britain, it was a success to a greater extent once again. But however, the problem of Britain, it came soon after the Vienna Settlement of 1815. So after the Vienna Settlement of 1815 now, we see Britain now clashing with other European powers. So if you come to the Holy Alliance, you go to the Congress system, deeper in the Congress system, that is where Britain now was now a problem. But here on the Vienna Settlement now, Britain tried by all means to unite, to combine with these countries so that they come up with the Vienna Settlement. And that explains why there was no war that took place in Europe for about 40 years. Another war took place in 1853-54, the Crimean War. Why a long time without war? It was because of the foundation. Which foundation are we talking about? The Vienna Settlement.
Okay, so today we're talking about the Vienna of 1815. So without further ado, Dr. Muso, let's go to the principles of the Vienna Settlement.
Yes.
When we are talking about the principles, maybe let me try to zero it down. The principles means the guidelines, the things that were supposed to be done by all European countries, the great powers and the smaller states. So principle number one, it was known as the principle of containment of France, containing France from future aggression. Maybe the reason why the great powers they came up with this principle, it was because France and the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era, France created a lot of problems for great powers. So one of the principles, I think they were successful because there was no peace in Europe because of France. So their first principle is very simple and straight to the point. Containment of France from future aggression. So we know from these principles there are certain things that they did in order to contain France. May we have a deeper analysis on that, Doctor?
This again, it was a success according to me, but other scholars now they think also otherwise. It was a success again to a greater extent. The fear of future French aggression. France, like what we've said, It had bothered European powers for 20 years.
20 years.
Yes, so here now that they have defeated France, what were they supposed to do? They were supposed to protect what themselves. So that is why they had to create what were known as buffer zones. That is why they had to create what were known as barrier states. That is why they had to create what were known as boundaries. Why? It is because if France wanted to attack them now, France was going to attack these buffer, these barrier, these boundaries, and by so doing now, they were going to be warming up. When France was going to be done with these countries now, it was going to be easy for them to defeat France. Why? It is because Napoleon had bothered them for a long period of time. Let me give you an example. At a school, we are students at a school. There's a person who bothers you time and again for about 20 years. And one of the days, you are in a position of defeating that person. When you defeat that person now, you look for a bodyguard. Every day now we are coming with a bodyguard. When people see you with a bodyguard, they will say, we are Buluza, but we are not Buluzalin, we are not Wonerin. Why? It is because you know the troubles, you know the problems that were given by that one person. That is what the European powers did in 1815. That is what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to protect themselves against future French aggression. Not only that, Twala, our parents, they also keep broilers at home. At your home, there is no fence. When there is no fence, Osela, Amasela, Wanambava, they always march, come stealing your chickens. Every time you are crying, my way, I'm a chicken army. They've been stolen by the people, by the Mbavas, by all sorts. Then your father will say, don't worry, I'm now going to put a jura, I'm now going to put a fence. When the Mbavas come, when they come tomorrow, they will see a fence. Did you do a great job? Did you do well? Yes. Why? You know the pain of losing chickens. The statesmen, they were supposed to put a buffer zone. So that was a success.
This is powerful, Dr. Muso. So in short, Dr. Muso is saying that one of the principles that we're talking about the principle of creating buffer zones. Remember, one of the things, the borders around France were very porous, so Napoleon took advantage of those porous borders, so he would march without any resistance. So what the great powers did at Vienna, they created strong borders around France.
Yes.
For example, you need to give examples. For example, they joined one, I'll give you one example. They joined Holland and Belgium to form the Kingdom of Netherlands. I said they joined Holland and Belgium to form the Kingdom of Netherlands.
Yes.
One of the things that was breaking the mind of the statement, remember the 100 days. Napoleon, during the 100 days, he marched to Belgium. So they realized that Belgium was very weak. So they strengthened Belgium by combining Belgium with Holland to form the Kingdom of Netherlands. However, there are some condemnations and criticism with that territorial arrangement. For example, Belgium was placed under foreign rule.
Certainly.
That was wrong, Dr. Muso. They placed Belgium under foreign rule. And number two, again, and Belgium was never consulted on that combination. Was never consulted that we are joining you with what?
Yes.
With Holland. That on its own, it shows that these guys, they were condemned them. Why? Because they undermined some of the powerful principles of nationality and liberalism. And you realize that the settlement was also temporal because the Belgians, they revolted later. So they are not creating permanent things, they are creating temporal things.
Yes.
But this doesn't dismiss the fact that these guys were driven by the spirit of creating peace in Europe. Why? Because France had created a lot of problems. So that's why they were trying to contain France. And another thing, they also, what they did, they took place an army of occupation in France.
Yes.
So we see these guys are peacemakers for sure.
Why
are they placing some soldiers there? They know the problem. The problem, the root cause is France. So let us try by all means to contain what France. Maybe Dr. Muso, you can give our students some of the illustrations, some of the
territorial. Let me also explain. The people who gathered in 1815, Madalas, like what I said, they were over 35. When the dollars meet now, they are worried about the children. Who are the children? The small states. So when they gathered now, what are they supposed to do? They are supposed to make sure that the children should enjoy. So how can the children enjoy? They should make sure that they put measures to make these children's lives safer tomorrow. The statesmen, they were elderly statesmen. The Europe that they knew, it was a Europe that was led by elderly statesmen. So for peace to prevail, they were not worried about small states. If you want to pass a decision at a home, you don't consult your children. You say, everyone, 6 o'clock, you be home. That is the fathers, they gathered in 1815, and what they do? Belgium, Holland, Genoa, Genoa added what to Piedmont. That is what they did. So we can say it was a success to a great extent, but however,
there are some flaws.
Yes, small states were sacrificed.
They elevated themselves.
Yes, and expense. Yes,
smaller.
You know what? About 6 o'clock. My father does not want me to put on trousers. But to the father, it's excellent.
It's excellent.
So it was excellent.
So the statesmen, they achieved through the creation of buffer zones. They wanted to maintain peace, and they achieved to maintain peace.
Certainly.
For how many years? 40 years.
Certainly.
Okay. So another thing, let's go to.
Before going to the next point, there is no answer that is wrong in history. What is wanted is to support
yourself.
Yes.
History is a subject of debate, and you debate with yourself. Remember, when you're writing an essay, you don't tell a story, but you argue. All right, good people. Let's go to the next principle. Let's talk about the principle of legitimacy. All right, maybe to give a background information, the great powers, the ideal Europe that they knew, it was in Europe that was ruled by monarchs. So now they wanted to remove everything Napoleonic and to restore the old rulers, those rulers, those that we called monarchs, the Magdalas that we're talking about. So through the principle of legitimacy, they removed everything Napoleonic. Remember, Napoleon, he installed his brothers, relatives during the Napoleonic era through the policy which was known as the Napoleonic dynasty policy. So when these guys they met at Vienna, they wanted to remove all those people that were installed by Napoleon and to make sure that they installed the rightful rulers, the so-called legitimate rulers. So that's the principle of legitimacy, to restore those people that were removed by Napoleon unconstitutional. Those people, those monarchs, right? So, good people, Dr. Muso, what do you think about that principle?
I say again, I will start with what we have said, saying that the Amadalas, they wanted to restore legitimacy. Who were the people who met in 1815? Amadalas. The Europe that they knew, it was a Europe that was ruled by what? Amadalas. That on its own, it's a success. Okay. Why do we say so? Let me give you an example. At a school, if we put on the youngsters, the Danton, the Marat, the Napo, who wanted to dominate the whole of Europe, who wanted to introduce republicanism, a new ideology, problems come in Europe. Danton, Robbie, Marat, they were now beheading people. What type of people? Yeah. If you come to the directory, we have got people who were Barras, who they were morally not upright at all. Napoleon again coming. The Madalas are saying, what is taking place? So when they gathered now, you know what, Madala? Let's now put the country back. If you at a school, if you want to see disorder, bring a headmaster who is 20 years old. When he comes, you say, no, we're no longer singing national anthem. From today, we are now singing the Winky D song. We're now singing Jah Preza. Jah Preza song. No longer singing the national anthem. The youngsters, the Dantons. So, for order to be restored, youngsters go away. Amadalas come here. Ferdinand VII. Ferdinand I. A Pope in the Papal States. Victor Emmanuel. So what can we say, Mr. Tuala? Was it a success? It was a success. Why? Because the Amadalas, they were going to restore back the peace that was stolen by the youngsters.
So in short, Dr. Muso, you are simply saying that the reason why these guys they to install those old rulers, they wanted to create stable governments. So there were no stable governments in Europe because of people like Napoleon. We know Napoleon, there was war after war, war after war. So these guys they said the only way to do away with this, the only way to create order or to maintain everlasting peace in Europe is to create those old Madalas. Why? because those guys, they were zero tolerant to any revolutions. If there is a revolution possible in Spain, those leaders, these newly formed monarchical leaders, they are going to crash revolution, and there is peace in Europe. So, but basically, let me just maybe give a few comments and we go to another principle. One of the comments that I can say, but these guys at some point they are compromising. For example, the issue of France, instead of them restoring Louis XVI with the absolute powers, they are restoring Louis XVIII with absolute powers. They are restoring Louis XVIII with the charter. So, in other words, these guys they are also driven by fear of France. That's why they are in. Let's talk of Ferdinand the First. Is restored with absolute powers. Let's talk of Ferdinand VII is restored with absolute powers. It's despotic. But with Louis XVIII, that's not the case. They are restoring Louis XVIII. So it's another achievement for the great powers. It's another success. Why? Because they also learned from the revolution. They are afraid that the people of France, they are going to revolt if they are given another despotic leader. That's why they are given an constitutional monarch, and he used the constitution which was so liberal.
According to D. Thompson, he was 65 years old. Other books they say Louis XVIII, he was 68 years old. D. Thompson now, he was reasonable and statesmanlike. Reasonable, statesmanlike. So he was just mature. So in France, we wanted a mature person.
Okay, but in conclusion, one of the things maybe that we can say is that the statesmen at Vienna, they restored some of the wasteful rulers.
Certainly.
Why am I saying so? Because they restored some of the despotic leaders such as Ferdinand I and Ferdinand of Seven. And we see revolution, they created problems, future problems in Europe. They created problems like revolutions in 1820s. It was because of the people that they installed in what? At Vienna. But at the same time, they also did a great job when they installed Louis XVIII with the charter. It's a sign that they learned something from the French Revolution.
Yes.
Or let's go to maybe to balance of power. When you talk of balance of power, these guys, they didn't want any power. They didn't want any power to dominate again in Europe. So they wanted to create a state of equilibrium, a state of balance, whereby when the powers they come up of Vienna, they are going to be equal. No one is going to be a bow or something, you know. So that on its own, I think it was an achievement, and this was actually bargained by Britain. So Britain, we will make sure that there was actually a dispute between Britain and Russia. Maybe we cannot talk about it because of time. Maybe we can explain something about the balance of power, but just brief so that we can end this audio.
Okay, on the balance of power, possibly we can say again, according to me, it was a success to a greater extent. Like what we have said, they were interested in equilibrium. But again, remember, in life, I want you to put you in the shoes of 1815. In life, there is nothing called fairness. There is nothing called fairness. Obviously, there will be someone who will be dominating. Number two, these people, when they met in 1815, you see that they were directed by the map of 1804. If you go to D. Richards, I think on page 66 now, there is that map of 1804. So what did they do in 1815? They had to say, Britain, come here. Which areas did you have before? Because before 1804, Napoleon was not an emperor for life. He was not so dominant. It became a problem now after that period, 1804. Britain, which areas did you have? Ceylon, Trinidad, take them, 1804. Prussia, which areas along the Rhine, take them. Rashi, which areas? I'm very shy. I only had Finland. I want more. Rashi, take only Finland. So they were directed by the map of 1804. Then we come to your word now. Compromise. Rashi, come here. Prashi, come here. We now divide Poland. Rashi, take 3/4 of what? Of Poland. Prashi, we are now giving you the capital city of Poland, Posen, and we give you 2/5 of what? Of Saxon. A compromise again. So what can we say? It was a success to a greater what? Extent.
Okay, I've got a point on that. These guys, they are statesmen. They are really diplomatic people. Why am I saying so to Chamuso? When we are talking about the issue of Poland, that was an issue that was going to cause. It is the issue of Grand Duchy of Warsaw, or the issue of Poland was going to cause a war in Europe. That actually it was going to divide great powers if that issue was not treated well. But these guys were diplomatic people. Why? They were very good to dealing with international relations and international problems.
Yes.
Why am I saying so? The money to compromise. The money to compromise. Because if they fail to compromise on that issue, another war was going to emanate in Europe. But because of that, we say by the fact that during this principle of balance of power, the money to share territories equally and acceptable to all, that was an achievement. It shows these guys are very successful. It is a masterpiece. So it's a sign that the Vienna Settlement was a masterpiece. Another thing, there was an issue of Poland that was going to cause a war, but the money to deal with it without causing any war and the money to compromise, we see they shared. But however, there are some problems. Some of the problems, maybe let's talk about the problems that were there and we end this audio. Some of the problems, maybe let's talk about some of the successes very fast. The students, they can read. We can talk about that. The Vienna Settlement, they managed to continue to end slave trade.
Okay, so possibly before slave trade, but on that issue on balance of power, you now talk about those questions that now comes now. Greedy, selfishness, conservative, fear, reactionary, liberal, retrogressive, illiberal, principal, those terms that comes now, linking them to what we are talking about.
That's great. And conservative.
Yes.
For example, maybe let me just give them a point of conservative. One of the things, Metternich of Austria was very conservative. He wanted to restore the old government. He supported, actually was so vocal about suppressing nationalism and liberalism. Why? Because Austria was made up of many nations. We talk of the Czechs, they were there. We talk of the Hungaries, they were in Austria. We talk of the Italians. So it was practically impossible for Austria to rule Austria with liberalism. So he wanted those two twins to be crushed, liberalism and nationalism. Because if those things were allowed, it means that Austria was going to be weak, because those smaller states were going to break from Austria. So in order for him to maintain and to consolidate his power in Austria, he was so vocal about crushing nationalism and liberalism. Okay, you can as well add the fear. We see fear of France, for example, creating buffer zones. The sign they feared France. We are seeing they are giving France a charter, while at least the other states they were given absolute monarchs. It's a sign that they feared France. Okay, so we can link all those terms that Dr. Musso mentioned with any point. You try to answer the question. It's very important to make the demands of the question. Alright, let's talk about some of the successes of the Vienna. We talk about the issue that even at Vienna they also discussed about the issue of ending slave trade. So it's a sign that they are also considering some of the humanitarian reasons. Actually, slave trade created a lot of problems, especially for Africans. But at Vienna, they are saying that we have to continue searching for slave ships. That on its own, it's an achievement.
Certainly.
And we know, we always say that yes, these guys, they elevated themselves in the expense of smaller states. Why? Because we see them joining smaller states. Smaller states were placed under foreign rulers. Some of them, they were unfortunate. For example, we talk of Poland. Poland was partitioned. That on its own, it's a weakness. We see these guys, they elevated. They never considered smaller states, but at the same time, they gave Switzerland independence. That was an achievement. Yes, they've got some bad things, but there are some good things that they're doing, ending slave trade. And another thing, what these guys they did, France was a defeated power. I always say France was a defeated power, but the fact that France was invited to follow the proceedings at Vienna Settlement, it made France not to develop the spirit of revenge. And later on, we see this actually, it actually worked. Why? Because we see that France later on joined them to form the Quadruple Alliance. So that on its own, we see that the Vienna Settlement, it has got its achievements. It was a successful settlement, but at the same time, there's some weaknesses. The reason being that actually we condemn it or we criticize it because actually they actually suppressed two important factors that all European nations they felt that they were important: the principle of nationality and the principle of liberalism, and they elevated themselves in the expense of smaller states. Thank you for listening to Dr. Moso and Mr. Twala signing out.